Today is Monday, October 7th, and this is Spring Office Hours Season 3, Episode 33, Spring Cloud Oracle. My name is Dan Vega, Spring Developer Advocate at Broadcom, joined by my good friend and colleague, DaShaun Carter. DaShaun, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. It is a great time to be a Spring developer, and today is it's a little cold, but it gets cold in the mornings, and then it warms up at night. So we're in this weird spot of the year.
Yeah.
But one of our colleagues, another Dan, said it's weird that we're still mowing the lawn in October, with the rain and the heat and the things, and the grass is still growing. But yeah, I'll take it.
It's been all over the place. So yeah, I've had a fun week. We had a great conversation last week on build packs. I had a busy week last week. How was your week? What were you up to?
It has been busy, right? I'm coaching football. That's been fun, but things are kind of exciting in the Spring ecosystem in Springland. So
yeah,
I'm very, very busy. I'm traveling a lot, doing a lot of customer stuff. So yeah, I've already had several conversations this morning. So things are just they're great. I love my job.
It is a lot of fun. Somebody asked me the other day, you are very busy. You're doing a lot of different things. I'm like, it doesn't seem like work when you really get to enjoy what you do. So having fun with it, especially today, we get to have a conversation with two very bright people about a fun topic. So I'm excited about that. And DevOps started. Yeah. So DevOps is starting this week. Good to see some conferences kicking back up. But yeah, before we bring on our two special guests, we have two special guests today. That's exciting. I just want to remind everyone, this is a live stream. We do it every Monday from 1 to 2-ish, depending on guests and the topic, right? If you are able to join us live, I see a lot of you here. Let us know where you're joining from. That'd be great. But if you're here, this is a good chance to get your questions in, DaShaun. Part of this show is, hey, we're here to answer your questions. So if you have questions about today's topic, maybe not about today's topic, we'll see if we can answer them. But if you can't get here live, you can always catch the replay on the Spring Developer YouTube channel. And if you miss both of those and you just like listening to us in your ears, that's also fine, right? We turn this into a podcast. This will get posted the day after the live stream, so you can go ahead and catch this on a replay wherever you get your podcasts. With that, DaShaun, I'm going to bring on our two special guests. Let's go ahead and bring them to the stage, Anders and Mark. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
We made it.
Great.
This has been in the works for a while. I hang out with Mark quite a bit. We have regular or semi-regular chats, and it's been awesome. So yeah, this is we've been kind of wanting to do this for a while, and here we are. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, it's
cool.
Great.
So,
it's great to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, before we get started, if we can go ahead and introduce you guys, let us know a little bit about what you do, maybe what you're here to talk about today. I'll start with you, Mark.
Thanks. I'm Mark Nelson. I work at Oracle, lead a team that works mostly on Spring microservices kind of stuff. So we have a project called Spring Cloud Oracle, where we're creating a bunch of starters and examples and auto configuration, both for Oracle Database and also for Oracle Cloud Services, to try and make it easy for customers who use Oracle and Spring to use them together.
Awesome.
And this is in the team, so you'll go ahead and introduce yourself too.
Yeah, go ahead, Anders.
Yeah, so I'm Anders Swanson. I work with Mark. I'm a developer evangelist, and I do a lot of different Spring stuff. I do dabble in open source projects. My main goal is to connect Spring developers with Oracle technologies, make them aware of them, how to use them idiomatically in a way with their apps. Yeah.
Awesome. So I think a good place to kind of kick this off, DaShaun, is we've talked about this before we even get into the Oracle piece of it. Spring Cloud at a high level. What are we doing with this project? What is it there for? DaShaun?
Spring Cloud. Yeah, connection to the clouds. The whole idea with Spring, what we try to do is provide that abstraction. So we've got Spring Cloud Oracle, Spring Cloud GCP, Spring Cloud, is it AWS, I think is what it's called. But we have these projects. Some parts are maintained by the Spring team. I think most of them are now maintained by the cloud providers themselves. But the abstraction is the same. It allows me to say, hey, I've got a Spring Boot app, and I'd like to connect to your database, please. And Spring Cloud, the Spring Cloud projects are the ones that you would use to, connect to the database in Oracle's cloud, connect to a database in GCP's cloud, and have that consistent way of delivering it. Starters,
Great.
etc.
So, all right. So that's kind of the Spring Cloud project as a whole. Mark or Anders, you can kind of kick us off. But Spring Cloud Oracle, what is it? Like, is it? It's not just hey, I need to connect to an Oracle database, right? It's so much more than that. So, can you maybe give us like a high-level overview of what the Spring Cloud Oracle project provides?
Yeah, so it's both for database and for the cloud services, OCI cloud services. So it's very similar. If you look at Spring Cloud, Azure, or AWS, you notice they have support for a bunch of services like queuing and notifications and storage and so on, and also very often for the various database offerings that they have on those clouds. And we've basically done the same thing. So we've made it possible to access the different databases like Oracle Database, NoSQL, and a bunch of the different cloud services. So, we have the email servers, functions, generative AI, inferencing, and embedding, logins, notifications, queuing, all the same kind of stuff. So for each service, we have a starter and a sample, and almost always, I think always, there's also auto configuration available, and we're trying to make them as idiomatic as possible. So they feel like you're using any other Spring starter. You configure them in the same way, you use them the same way, all that kind of stuff.
This is valuable, I think, for our community. And one of the things that I guess one of our earliest conversations, like one of the things, if I'm going into the Oracle ecosystem, and this was on Anders, I watched Anders' video that he put out maybe a week or two ago, and UCP, like that's kind of like a big value add. I like easy buttons. And if I've started something from start.spring.io, I get the Hikari connection.
Exactly, yeah.
Pooler, and it's the universal connection pool, right? That's what UCP stands for. That is one of those things that's an easy change to take my Spring app and give it all the benefits of Oracle. Tell me a little bit more about the UCP and why I might want to do that.
Yeah, so Hikari is going to work for a lot of use cases, and that's the reason why it's the default in Spring. But the reason why you might want to use a different connection pool is you want to take advantage of those more advanced features of Oracle Database that are database specific. So there's different things like sharding or rack that are built into that UCP connection pool. So if you're using that, you're going to be able to take advantage of those features, and it's going to help your app maybe scale beyond what you're used to.
You said two things there that I want to ask more. Sharding, you said sharding or rack.
Yeah, Mark, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so sharding is like other databases, like you can run Oracle in multiple shards, maybe in different data centers or different regions. And you can distribute the data based on some kind of sharding algorithm. Like maybe you keep all of your West Coast customers in a California data center and your East Coast customers in say an Austin or a Ashburn or whatever data center. So the same concept that you'd be familiar with any other sharding database Oracle supports as well. In fact, we contributed JDBC sharding support into Spring JDBC 6.1, I think.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's cool. One of the things we talk about is like the defaults are great to get out the door, but for the Spring data tier, like, hey, we get the 90% of the functionality that's the same, but it's that 10% when I switch between data stores, is that 10% of the advanced features. Those are the reasons why I switched. I would like to take advantage of those, please. And one of the things that I'm faced with right now with a couple of customers is they take the defaults and then they go to production. They're like, well, the defaults, like we didn't change anything. This should work until, right? The right answer changes over time. And this is one of those interesting things is like, hey, if you're using Oracle, you might want to consider it's that easy. It's an easy button to change to be able to, one, take advantage of some of these other capabilities, but then two, also the defaults are configured specifically for Oracle.
Yeah, and one of the big things in UCP for me is the high availability features. So if you are running like active passive databases and you have a failover, like say your data center loses power, you fail over to your other data center. If you have a UCP connection, it will actually move across to the new database without the application experiencing an outage, which is great. So some of the a lot of customers or a lot of users who are using Oracle, in their on-prem environments do have those kind of highly available configurations with multiple database clusters in different data centers, and they want to take advantage of those kinds of features. They want to be able to have the application continue operating if there's a problem without experiencing an outage. So that for me is one of the big reasons to think about maybe using UCP in your applications.
I'm a big fan of not getting phone calls on the weekend. I don't know about you, but I love not getting phone calls about, hey, things fell over or things broke. So that's great. So what else?
It's fairly easy to switch over to UCP2. You can include our UCP starter in your Spring application and then change your connection pooling class to that UCP pooling. And then your data source bean you're using in your JDBC connections is going to be that UCP pooling bean. So it's very easy to just switch over and try it out if you want.
So
Fantastic.
I guess one of the questions I would have is, if I'm kicking off a new project, how do I get started with Spring Cloud Oracle? How do I include the bits that I need to include depending on what I'm using? Maybe I'm using a database. Maybe I'm using some of the Oracle OCI services. How can I kind of get started or get up and running with it? Yeah.
A great place to start is to go to our Spring Cloud Oracle GitHub page, where we have all of our different database starters, all our OCI starters there. And in each module, we've included a sample that has a Maven POM example of what you would need to do if you're building an application using these, because these sample applications function just similarly to a very simple dev application. And that's going to have the dependencies. It's going to show you how to wire things up with your application properties, get connected to OCI, use UCP or any of our other starters. So that's a great way to get started. We also have quite a few samples that we've been blogging about on Medium. I'm trying to get started with more videos on YouTube and find new ways to reach people and get people started with these things.
Yeah, samples are a great way, because if I can go ahead and look at an example project, I can usually kind of, between that and some documentation, I can kind of figure out where I need to go. So another question I would have is, say my company's using Oracle. Obviously, Oracle's used everywhere. It's a huge database vendor. But what about if I wanted to get just like an MVP project on my local machine? I know that using Oracle in the past, just for like local development or for like a test container integration, was probably a little bit harder. Seems like it's a lot easier these days. Can I use just like a local instance of an Oracle database so I can run it on my local development machine?
This is one of my favorite things that's come out with Oracle Database to ease that sort of developer barriers that have been there in the past.
Yep.
And with our 23AI, most recent release of Oracle Database, we have a free image. There's various ways to use database free now. Like you can run it in the cloud for free on free tier.
Yep.
You can download a free executable, or you can run it in container. And
awesome.
It's definitely not a lightweight container. Like you need a decent amount of memory because it is Oracle Database, but it runs awesome on your machine. You can run it with test containers. And in every sample example kind of thing I do, I illustrate this with test containers. So it's using Oracle Database in your Spring Boot test.
So
just like you would do with any other type of containerized test.
Yeah, and if it runs if it runs in a container, I imagine, I haven't tried this yet, but I imagine I can use this with Spring's Docker Compose support. So I can just declare it as a service. When my Spring application starts up, that image starts up and I'm ready to go. And that makes things so much easier for me.
I haven't tried Docker.
The test container stuff is great. Like there's an image there's a version of the image called Fast Start, which will, for me, it starts in about 7 seconds or so on my machine, which is like, it's maybe too slow for a unit test, but if you're like running integration tests, it's nothing.
Yeah, and if you're using Docker Compose support in Spring, you can set a property to say start only instead of start and stop, so you don't have to do that every single time. And again, that makes development life so much easier, I think. So
And
that's great to hear, though.
With Liquibase too, so you don't have to worry about dirtying the context or restarting it or anything. You can have your tests go and create schemas or reference data or whatever you need and that sort of stuff. So,
It's
Anders, you said a few things there that I wanted to touch on. First of all, you talked about, hey, we have the free image, but then you mentioned the free tier, and I tell everybody, Oracle Cloud's free tier is hands down, far and away, the most generous free tier that you could possibly find. It is absolutely amazing, and I just want to share that. Like, you can go and get an Oracle instance running in Oracle Cloud. So not just hey, generous free tier.
It's not just one. You can get 2 serverless autonomous database instances in your free cloud trial.
Oh my goodness.
Wow. That is pretty cool.
Serverless.
Yeah, I would highly recommend, if you haven't checked it out, go to the free tier sign up page and just check and look at those always free services.
So now instead of having to run that, instead of having to run that container locally, I can just hook up to the service that's out there in the cloud for me.
If you have some sort of integration test that you don't want to be spinning up containers all the time, you can hook it up to an ADB autonomous database instance in the cloud.
Awesome.
Our friend Jonas is in the comments. He says, I can confirm, I love Oracle OCI.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's
another great thing in OCI is in the always free, like in the free tier, you get to use Ampere ARM or ARM images. We've just actually released Oracle on ARM as well.
That was my next question. I was going to ask. You talked about, hey, I've got a free image that I can do. Thank you. Thank you. So I can run Oracle on an ARM processor.
Yep.
Yes.
For free.
It's more than sufficient, I would say. I think it's 4 OCPUs, Mark, and 24 gigabytes of memory, which is way more than you would need.
That's amazing.
So we talked about databases, but now if I'm on the free tier, the OCI services, then I can start to incorporate some of these other services, right? Like, I'm not just talking to a database. Maybe I need to do event streaming or something. We talked about eventing a couple weeks ago. What are some of the more popular services that folks are using that I might start to reach for?
So I think 2 of the really interesting ones for me are storage and Vault. And then people do obviously use events and notifications and logging and stuff as well. But the storage one is interesting. Anders actually set it up so that you can use an object store bucket or an object in the object storage as a resource, a Spring resource provider. And you can use a secret in the Vault as a property source for Spring. So, in your Spring Boot app, you can say, get the value from directly from a Vault secret, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah. So with the object storage integration there, if you provide a value annotation with the URL to your object in a bucket, that field in your class becomes a Spring resource for that object.
Awesome.
Which is pretty handy for reading that data down and accessing it dynamically without having to preload it or something like that.
Very nice.
The Vault setup is for Spring property sources. So with the Spring environment post-processor, it goes out to OCI, takes that list of vaults. You can have 1 or more vaults in your property source list, read the secrets from those, and inject them into the Spring context. And then there's also a refresh interval. If those secrets change, we can refresh it on some configurable timeout.
So it also sounds like... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that the other service that's probably really popular right now is the generative AI service.
Oh, yeah. Now you're talking my language.
Tell me more.
Yeah. So we have a service that provides an inferencing and embedding with a number of different models. There's a playground which lets you use them for free, so you can go and play with the models and adjust the temperature and the top K and all the parameters and that sort of stuff. It'll auto-generate code for you to show you how to, include it in a Java or a Python application. And we Oracle made a contribution to Spring AI to add vector store support for Oracle.
Awesome.
Yeah, Oracle has vectors as a native data type in the 23 AI version. Actually, we changed the name. We used the C suffix before, so the last version was 19C. We changed it to AI because a lot of the vector store and AI stuff is like one of the biggest features in the new version of the database, alongside with all the JSON collection stuff. So we had vector store support we added to Spring AI, which is great. So in a Spring AI application, you can build a RAG, chatbot, create all your embeddings, store the vectors in Oracle, and use that as your vector store to do a similarity search and find documents and stuff them into your prompt for asking questions to an LLM.
Awesome.
So
and I can imagine security is top of mind there. So I know a lot of customers that we are talking to, like, hey, we want to provide some of these features, these AI features, being able to do RAG. Where am I storing my information? It's got to be secure. So that sounds like a really great option. And yeah, we talk about Spring AI all the time. If you're not familiar with kind of vectors and RAGs, vector databases are a way to store information in a vector format, but you also need the embeddings to be able to take your documents and break them down into those, store them in those vector stores. So it sounds like if you're using Spring AI and you want to take advantage of that with Oracle, everything is there for you to get started quickly. So that's awesome.
Yeah, if you have a bunch of other business data that's already sitting in Oracle, and you have queries, and you have JSON collections or whatever, you can combine them with vector search in the same query. So you don't have to move your data around.
Wait, tell me that. Say that one more time.
Yeah.
Mark, say that one more time.
So the vector support is just like another data type. So you can combine, if you're writing an SQL query with relational data, or if you're doing a JSON query, like a GraphQL query against a JSON collection or something like that, you can combine those with the vector search, like a vector similarity search. So you could say, go and get me, XYZ from this table, but also find the things that are similar to, whatever based on vectors in a single query, which is pretty neat.
I think one of the questions we get a lot from customers is hey, I have a lot of data sitting in a database somewhere. How can I make that available to my AI applications? So if I have a bunch of data in an Oracle database right now, are you saying we can easily query that as well as whatever's in our vector database, or can we move that over to a vector database? What's kind of how would we approach that?
You can combine the vector search and any other kind of query in a single query. So, you might want to do a vector search to find things that are similar, and then use those results to go and query some table to look up some, associated data or something like that, for example, or query a JSON collection to find documents that are related to the things that you found in your vector search, that sort of thing. So,
that's awesome.
Agents or agentic stuff is where we're a lot of interest. You could imagine building a chatbot with a RAG with people could come and ask, say you're a bank, what kind of account can I open, or what's the fee for a checking account or whatever. But then they might want to say, hey, did my check clear, right? And you can imagine an agent going and talking to your database and looking up that information for them and doing queries to the database to get data and talking with the user, which is pretty cool. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, and I know Spring AI is starting to move in that agent. Everyone's doing agent stuff now. That's the new cool thing. So we're real excited about that as well.
Things move so fast, and it's hard to keep up. I know that my demos, my things haven't kept up. Mine are still on M1. Most of them are still on M1, and I need to upgrade them. But M3 is, if it's not released today, it's right around the corner. Things are moving fast. Is Spring Cloud set up? Is there a starter that's going to make it easy for me to work with Spring AI?
So there is a starter in Spring AI for Vector Store.
Fantastic.
So you can go to Spring AI to get that starter, and it'll pull in your like OJDBC kind of Oracle database dependencies, the Spring AI interfaces. So when you put a vector store bean into your app, you get Oracle database set up for you.
Fantastic.
We did. I think we also upstreamed, correct me if I'm wrong, generative AI service for embedding and inputting into
I
Spring AI.
just checked in a pull request for the embedding service, and then I have the chat service kind of on deck. So there'll be a sort of full featured Oracle support there for the OCI side in terms of the generative AI services in the cloud, as well as the Oracle database vector store.
Yeah, if you're on start.spring.io, I just checked, you can go to dependencies and pull down Oracle Vector Database, and it says Spring AI Vector Database support for Oracle, enables storing, indexing, searching, vector embeddings in Oracle Database 23 AI. So yeah, that's right there from the Spring initializer. That's great to see.
Our friend Simon says
in
the
the
soda
it's in the
support.
Spring documentation too, so you can go
Yep.
there and see how to do whatever properties in your Spring application YAML, whatever, to get that configured.
Yep. Cool.
Soda support. What's soda? Simon, I don't know what soda is.
Soda is
Soda.
I think it stands for simple Oracle document access or something like that. I think.
I think you're right,
That's
Mark.
Right.
It basically lets you access like documents. It's like so Oracle has like lots of different data types, not just relational. Like it's also has JSON, like Mongo, has graphs, it has text, it has all kinds of vectors, all kinds of stuff, right?
So the JSON support's been there for a long time, right? Like
Yeah, it's been there for a long time.
Yeah.
So Soda is like is Oracle's API. We also support the Mongo API. And we also, the other big thing in 23 AI is we have like native JSON collections and something that we call JSON relational duality views, which is really interesting. So,
that was a mouthful, first of all.
it is,
My head wrapped around.
So it lets you separate the way the data is stored from the way that you access the data. So you can store your data in relational tables, like people have been doing for decades.
Mm-hmm.
You can create a view over the tables using GraphQL that makes them appear like a JSON document. So you can pull pieces from multiple tables and all that kind of stuff. And then as a developer, you can just access, you can do gets and puts and stuff on the JSON document. So it's read-write. So you can update the JSON document and the database will figure out what it has to do to go and update relational tables.
Yeah.
So you don't get all the duplication and everything that you get when you're storing JSON documents, because it is still a normalized data structure in the back end, right? But you don't have to, as a developer, you don't have to know about JSON and SQL and normalization and that. You can just deal with JSON documents, which is super natural and easy. We do also have native JSON support, so you don't have to store them in relational. You can just store them as JSON documents as well.
JSON column, yeah.
But for people like DaShaun, I know you really care about people who have systems that they've had for many years and they have to update them and enhance them and integrate and that. I think this is a fantastic innovation, because all that data that people have got sitting in relational tables, you can just make it available to developers in JSON, and unlock the value of all that data that you have sitting there. So it's a great feature, and we have starters available for that as well to let you just plug it in.
I'm hearing a lot of really cool things.
I know.
There's a lot of toys here to play with, and I know there's a lot of starters, and I actually there's an email starter. Like, I'm not sure if this is like I will say I've not used the other clouds as my email. I've not done that, but then I get a Spring starter for Oracle's OCI email. I was intrigued by that. Is this popular? Is this a high demand? Is this a high value add in Oracle Cloud? I mean, email's not going away.
By like applications, like SaaS applications customers who need to send out emails, about stuff to people. And the other place I've seen it used is like in like authentication flows and that sort of thing. Like, I forgot my password. Sort of
Yeah. That's cool. I mean, I like having just one less thing to configure, one less third party to configure. If I'm on Oracle Cloud and I can, deliver my email there, like, fantastic. Love it. And maybe more than I should. I shouldn't be that surprised about a starter for email.
It gives you the the simple mail sender and the Java mail sender beans,
Right on.
which are part of that sort of Spring Mail API configured with the OCI cloud authentication.
Right on.
Awesome. Anders, you mentioned earlier that you just did a video. DaShaun said he watched it. I have not watched it yet. Where can I find these videos? I want to make sure I get a link in here so that everybody can watch them.
Yeah,
and
I'll add
so that
one
I
into
can
the
watch
chat.
them. All
It's
right,
sort of
cool.
a tour of the Spring Cloud Oracle GitHub repository.
Perfect.
And the
That'd be a
different
great place to
modules that we
start.
offer there, yeah.
Yep.
Got it.
So part of like Spring Cloud in general, and it looks like Spring Cloud Oracle kind of supports this, is like using the different pieces of Spring Cloud. So like if I wanted to use Spring Cloud config for such centralized like configuration, it sounds like that Spring Cloud Oracle would support things like configuration management, service discovery, client-side load balancing, all the things we kind of expect in like cloud applications. Is that correct?
Yep.
All in all, we're trying to make it like as idiomatic as possible. So some of the earlier stuff that we have is not quite as idiomatic as we would like it to be, but we've been working through, in particular, adopting the template pattern. Like, you have a JDBC template, an AMS template, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So, for some of the services, like say the queuing service, we want to have like a queue template, and follow that same pattern so that it's natural, and you don't have to like go read the documentation and figure out how I use this thing, because it's sort of the same pattern.
Right.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Who's got time to read documentation?
Yeah.
I do. I love reading docs.
But I want to go back, Mark. We've had this conversation. One of the things we talked about, I'm a big fan of the Spring CLI. Did we ever do anything with the Spring CLI repository and the samples?
Yeah, we have one. We have a project catalog in here in Spring Cloud Oracle. We only have one project template so far, which is for our backend product, which lets you run Spring Boot applications in OCI or Azure or on-prem. And we're expanding that to Amazon and Google now, based on recent announcements a couple of weeks ago at Oracle Cloud World. Larry Ellison announced that we would make Oracle available on Amazon and Google in addition to Azure and Oracle.
Oh, wow.
Our autonomous database. So now that that's all announced and official, we're expanding the support across those as well. I saw a question before about Amazon RDS and that sort of thing. So one of the things we're looking at is working with those other cloud providers to see if there's starters that they have already cover using Oracle in their environments, or if they need any help or contributions or that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, we're working through that to make it. We want to make it as easy as possible for you to use it, whichever cloud you choose to run it on.
DaShaun, I want to unpack that a little bit in case somebody doesn't know what you just said. What is Spring CLI? What are these project templates, and what were you and Mark talking about working on there?
So Spring CLI has this idea of a project catalog. So if I'm working on something in our org, and I want to have some examples, some reference implementations of how to use something specifically, I can pull down an example from a project catalog. So I saw that we had the samples here. And one of the things we had talked about in the past was like having a Spring Cloud Oracle project catalog where I could just add that catalog. If I'm a Spring developer, I can add the Spring Cloud Oracle catalog to my CLI. And then I can say something like Spring Boot add Spring Cloud Oracle Starter Vault. And it would give me a reference implementation based on that sample. Or I could create a new one based on that sample and be able to connect to it automatically. So similar to having like a start.spring.io experience, but getting, instead of just like the dependencies, I would have dependencies and I'd have some example code.
Starter code.
Like
And I've heard you refer to this as like the Spring Initializer plus, right? It's not just the starter code, but it's not just the boilerplate starting code. It actually has like starting code in there that, hey, maybe this is how we do things in our organization. But at least for this, like the Spring Cloud Oracle starters, right?
It's good because you can add, not just for us, but for any kind of project, you can create your own, right? It's good because you can add code, and you can add config, and you can add comments, like a lot more stuff than like if you put something in Spring Initializer, you really can only play with dependencies, and there's a few other things you can do. But it's there's a defined scope of what you're allowed to mess with. So the project templates are great. Like we're working on adding more. Like you could imagine, say you have a project template that will already is configured with test containers to start up a database for you. It has a vector store.
Ooh, nice.
Spring AI, blah blah blah, and sample code for like a chatbot and a simple RAG and comments all the way through to explain what's happening and test.
But your samples catalog here, like that's a great, like, hey, I want to do Spring Boot new Spring Cloud OCI Gen AI sample, and it'll give me all the code that's updated as the current releases because it's pulling down from your GitHub repository, so I can get started. And the cool thing is, I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing. I can literally make my own project catalog, point it to the repositories that I support, that I'm a fan of, that I'm going to allow to go to production in my organization. And I could point a project catalog to the ADB sample, the email sample, the function sample, and the Gen AI sample. And I can make that available to my team, to my org.
Yep. It's kind of like a getting started guide, but I don't have to write any code. I just get the code and then I can read through it and run it right away. And it kind of gives me that jump start on creating a project, right?
And if I combine projects, and this all started, Dr. Mark Pollack did this, and for the Spring team, it all started based on the Spring samples, right? Our little getting started with JPA, build a RESTful endpoint, etc. But he made it so that you could combine projects. So if I combine the email example and the function sample, it'll actually pull the README docs so that you get the documentation from the repository in your project. So you can,
that's really cool.
Not just like start a project, but you can start it and read about it, once you get started. So I'm a big fan of it. I'd love to see that.
AI is really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to see us.
It's like one less barrier to entry there for getting started, from reading the docs to getting the working app with the guardrails to get you started.
And
sometimes
I always do the same things. Like I go to initialize and I grab blah 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 web and APA, but then I always go into the same kind of setup config. I point it to my Eureka server. I blah blah blah. You can just create a template and like automate all of that, so you don't have to do it over and over again every time you create a project.
And I think like I used to work the other way. It was like, all right, let me go read all the docs, then go through a guide, try to create a sample. I'd much rather create a sample, run it, see it work, and then go, all right, now I don't understand this piece. Let me go read the docs for that piece, not everything that I just did, right? So yeah, I think it's a great way to get up and running.
It's one of the things that it just seems like the Spring team has done a good job of. And you guys are contributing, like this idea that we want to make it as easy as possible to get you to production, to get your work to production. And we want to make it easy to start, instead of like, oh yeah, once you get all the things in place, then we'll fill the code. But it'd be a whole lot easier to have things in place.
I don't know if you know this, DaShaun, but developers, at least that I've run across, they're very smart. They're also very lazy. Like we don't want to go through and manually do all of this stuff.
Nobody does. I like getting to production.
I like to start with, if you can look at some code that you know it works, because that's the problem. Like you read an article or a blog or a video, and you go like, well, does this still work, or is this
much code?
Is there like one little piece missing that I'm not going to be able to actually do this? I like it. If you know it works and you can run it and see it working yourself, then you can start picking it apart and understanding how it works.
Yeah, and there is nothing more frustrating than going through like a blog post and go, okay, I'm going to do this. And then you go through every step and it doesn't work. And you're like, what the heck? What did I do wrong? Turns out like something's outdated or something, right?
My pet peeve is when they code samples without the import statements. You're like, what is this?
Which one are you pulling?
Which property is this?
Yep. Another thing that we've talked about in the past, and it's in my head, but I don't know that we've followed up on it. This idea, like, hey, I've got stuff that's running with Hikari, and I'm a big fan of open rewrite. And we talked about like, hey, wouldn't it be nice to have a recipe that allows me to go from Hikari over to UCP? Has that gone anywhere? I feel like I saw
literally like the top of our roadmap in our repo.
Amazing.
And
that's amazing.
I'd be doing it now if I wasn't here talking to you.
Okay, that sounds great.
All right. Well, we gotta go then. That was fun.
So we'll have a follow-up show when that's done, because this idea, this is another thing. Like we have this ecosystem that it demands more from the frameworks, from the cloud providers. It demands more from the marketplace, right? These workloads that have been running in production, that have been making company money or saving company money or whatever, they demand more. They need care and feeding, and making small changes like upgrading your Java version, like upgrading your Spring Boot version, like upgrading your connection pooling. These are small changes that can have massive results.
Oh, yeah.
And when you have more than 5 applications running in production, those little things add up to huge value and a competitive, advantage when you get an
I've
extra.
got a new one for you. I was at a customer last week, and I was talking about this. They had a Java 23 update, and there's a switch in the garbage collector in Java 23, which I just learned about, which makes apps about 10% faster. And I know, you have that presentation where you go through and you can do this. It costs you 0 time and effort, and you get X% performance improvement, upgrading from Java 8 to 11 or something or 11 to 2017 or something. I think was the example you used. It's another little thing like that.
I have dozens of those, and this is another one, right? It wouldn't it be nice to be able to show here's Hikari to UCP, right? Just I like having those examples that it does a few things, right? I'm mostly talking to developers, but developers like to show their work, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't like to toot their own horn. But if we can make it easy for them to show their work, toot their own horn, get massive results. What I don't want is somebody watching the show that's using Hikari. I don't want them to go and make that change, give their company massive performance improvement benefit, and nobody knows why. One of the things I want developers to do that change, but also measure the difference. So that's one of the things I try to show is you can measure the difference and show it. Because if you get, a 10% improvement, overnight from making this one small code change, in my org, me and Dan, we'll get a nicely written email if we do that in our org. But if you do a couple of those together, you string a few of those easy button improvements together, you might get cookies for your whole team.
Yeah.
And it's this is the kind of thing that we just want to make sure that people are aware. Don't do all these good things and not show it, right? Get cookies for your team.
Yeah. I think one of the other things I wanted to touch on, one of the things I always talk to developers about is, yes, we're writing all these applications on our machines, but eventually we're going to get them to production, right? That's the goal. We want to get it into production. And one of the things we need to be mindful of is observability. We can't just throw our applications out there in the wild and have no idea what's going on. So I know Spring has baked a lot of really great observability improvements since Spring Boot 3.0.
Yep.
Is there any kind of services out there in OCI that can make this easy? Where can I store my metrics? Where can I store log management? Is that available for me to kind of plug into my Spring Cloud Oracle apps?
That's a good
question. This is something we want to do. It's not there yet, but we want to add a OCI micrometer implementation that could take whatever metrics you have and dump them into OCI. So it's sort of on the roadmap for us to get done.
Awesome.
And I would love to see that out there. Yeah.
So logging is there already.
Awesome. Perfect.
Grabbing your logs. Metrics is to come. For Trace, one of the things we've talked about this before too, that we're working on is if you use the Oracle JDBC driver, you can get a client-side trace that will show you what's happening, what statement it's going to execute in the database and all that kind of stuff.
Nice.
On the server side, we've also added OpenTelemetry support on the Oracle Database server, so that we will be able to, this is not in the current release, this is coming, but we'll be able to inject spans from the server side. So you can imagine when you're looking at a distributed trace for your Spring Boot microservice, you'll see, I'm going to run this query, and then you'll see spans that say, I did a table scan, or I used an index, or I used this hashing algorithm or that one, and you see what actually happened inside the database.
Right.
So,
this is a big difference, right?
That's awesome. Yeah.
We can do the distributed tracing. A lot of times it's kind of down to here's the query that ran. What you're saying is we can soon have that trace go all the way into the database, where the database, the Oracle instance, is going to say, here's the query that came in, here's the things that I did inside of the database. Oh, I had to go do the scan or whatever it was. And that information will become part of that distributed trace that you get back from your
because
impact of you know, if I added an index, like you were saying, if I went and added an index, I could reduce this from, you know, I don't know, 1 second to 1/100th of a second or whatever, you know, just making up stuff. You know?
Yeah, and that's huge because like we have like different services, right? Service A calls B, calls C, calls the database. But once we get to a database, sometimes that's lost. Maybe a database, maybe we don't know what's the execution plan is there, what's happening, but maybe that database is contacting another database table to pull some information over or something, right?
Yeah.
And I think that would give us some really great insights to that. So that's awesome.
We also, if you are running like in a span and you put a message on a queue, the execution context ID or the span ID will flow through with the message. So if that gets read on another queue by another microservice, you'll be able to include that in the trace. Like you don't lose, like when you put a message on the queue, you don't just lose it. You'll see what happened on the other end.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
a lot of really cool things coming out of that team. One of the things I say often is when you come to my house for dinner, if you leave hungry, that's your fault. So we're here. It's spring office hours. So I'm going to look to the chat, the live chat, see if you've got questions, get them asked. That's what we're here for. And I want to remind everybody, like, hey, let us know where you're joining from when you say hi, because my mom and dad like to watch the show. They like to see where everybody's joining from.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm just looking down the roadmap here on the GitHub repository. It's really nice to see all those things you guys got planned there. Just kind of reading through some of that, but that's pretty cool.
We do have two. One thing we didn't mention is we did a Spring Cloud Stream Binder implementation.
Ooh, nice.
So for folks who use Spring Cloud Stream to create like data pipelines and stuff, if you want to use Oracle as the JMS provider, there's a starter included there for that.
Perfect.
There is some people may not know this, but there is an in-database message broker inside Oracle Database.
I have heard that.
Which uses an NQ, DQ format. It's very, very similar to other message brokers like Apache Kafka or things like this. And the Spring Cloud Stream Binder hooks up to that in-database message broker. So you're doing all that publish, subscribe kind of stuff with those functional Spring interfaces in the database.
And that's at the database level, so I don't have to have a separate service set up for that.
There's no external server. Your data is staying within the database. An interesting thing about this message broker is it is backed by tables. So when your data is landing into a queue, I can query that data with a SQL query if I want to.
Oh, nice.
Nothing to stop that. It also has that additional message broker functionality.
I like that. I live by the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. I don't have to have another service stand up for that.
There's multiple.
Another interesting thing about it is that it's transactional. So if you have a database transaction, say if you want to write a record in a table, like read a message and write a record in a table, you can do that in a transaction. So you can either commit or roll back. So, if something goes wrong, say you try to write the message and there's a foreign key violation or whatever, you can roll back and the message will not have been read either off the queue.
That is nice. That gets a little bit complicated with separate services going on, so that is cool.
Tips and tricks for writing JUnit tests with Oracle.
Yeah,
I've been doing a lot of stuff with Spring Test, especially I love the slice testing that you test say the web tier without having to load the whole application context. I love that. We've been using the Spring shell tests to test CLI stuff, calling backend. That's great. And the Spring JPA is like still slice testing, Spring data slice. That's really good.
That is great.
And I think the big one for me is like the test containers, because like a lot of people we talk to, they say like, well, we run Oracle, in production, but it's hard to run Oracle on my development machine, so I do my tests with MySQL or Postgres or something else, which is you're not really testing the same thing, So with with test containers and with the Oracle, fast start free database container image, I think you get the exact same database that you would get in production, with all the features enabled and everything. Just obviously less, memory and CPU and all that. But that's a big one for me. Like writing your tests to run against the exact same server that you're going to be using is just saves heaps of work.
Absolutely.
That's huge.
Yeah, because we've talked about that before. Like if you're writing your tests against like an H2 database and you're using Oracle in production, things may seem okay, and then you get to production and things aren't working as expected. So better to test as close to production as possible. So
I had an interesting experience actually. We did a presentation at the Austin Java user group on improving the performance of a Spring Boot application, right? So we wrote an application. It was like a toll gantry thing, like recording cars going through a toll gate.
Okay.
And you'd get like some data and a picture of the car, right? And it would go off and check. It used like the OCI vision service to check if the picture of the car, like it should be a red SUV. And we'll look at the picture. Is this a red SUV or not?
Yep.
And we wrote this in Spring Boot 2.7 and Java 8 or 11. I think we used Java 11. And then we went through a process of like we actually used your stuff, DaShaun. We ran the recipes and upgraded it all the way.
Fantastic.
And then we fiddled with how many threads. We turned on virtual threads in Java 21. We did all this stuff and made it faster. And like the database query wasn't. And the interesting thing, I was trying to make the database query slow at the beginning so that I could improve it.
Uh-huh.
And it was very difficult because the optimizer would keep kicking in and like rewriting my query or creating, like doing all this stuff. Like it was actually, in the end, I had to kind of almost cheat a little bit and just make it like count to 1 million in the middle of the query so that it would be slow. But that was an interesting experience actually. I think that's recorded on. I'm not sure if it's on YouTube or not. I'll check.
We'll have to look. But you said something else that we need to double click on is virtual threads.
Yeah.
Is virtual thread support built in to these starters?
If you're on Java 21, this will work with virtual threads. Yeah.
That's
perfect.
Huge. That's huge because not every driver, right? So just because we have virtual threads, not every driver, not everything library is going to support the virtual thread usage. Getting those drivers that have support there, and it's not all of them, right? That there's a small bit of the ecosystem. So this is fantastic, wonderful news.
So it's interesting. Like, when we were doing the starter, we look at stuff like, say the JSON starter to use JSON collections. We're like, well, what is the thing we should inject? Should we inject the database connection, like the connection pool, or should we inject a collection or whatever? And so some things like the connection pool is not thread safe, right? Or I can't remember, or something. There's some object in the hierarchy. The database connection is not thread safe, but the pool is, or something like that. So I can't remember which one it was, but exactly what you're saying. Like we had to make sure that we went to the right level in the hierarchy and we injected the right thing so that it would work with virtual threads and all that kind of stuff.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's exciting. It's just that alone. Again, these are these like little knobs that we can turn and get all this massive benefit. And virtual threads is a huge one. Fantastic. This is great.
Another cool thing with connections, real quick, is Oracle supports server-side connection pooling in the database. So one thing we found with a lot of users, if you create a lot of microservices, right, and each one has their own connection pool. Maybe they have 10 to 15 connections in the connection pool, right? And then you run multiple instances, say in Kubernetes of each service. So you say you've got 10 instances of 10 services each. Now you're up to like 1,000 to 1,500 database connections right away, like before you even do, which is a lot. And those are like an expensive, heavy resource, right? And people would like run out of connections. So one interesting thing you can do is you can switch to server-side connection pooling, and then on the server side, it can share them amongst all of these instances of all of these different microservices.
Oh, nice.
Rather than each one having its own great big connection pool, with all those dedicated resources. So that's
nice.
Thing.
Yeah, and if you're using virtual threads, then you're not blocking as many threads on the operating system level, right? So you don't need as many. So exactly. That's awesome.
This is that right there. That's something that is very interesting to me, and that's something that I want to see a demo of. But this is a problem, right?
Yeah.
There's some query that's taking a long time. One of the problems that I ran into and still do today is like, oh, here's the slow query, but who's making it? Right? If we can have some kind of sense of which microservice, if I've got microservice A is sharing a server-side connection pool, at least I know which service it is, right? But sometimes I don't even have that much information. This is all super valuable for not just like being able to optimize my resources, but then also like debugging and observability. This is huge. I know where to look.
Cool. So I'm putting a link in here. A couple things we talked about. One, the Oracle Cloud free tier. It sounds like we all have to make sure we sign up for that because we're not going to run out locally development machines. There's a whole bunch of free services that we can use, at least to kind of give these like a MVP, stand up an MVP, dry run this, see how this works. So that's one thing. And then we mentioned the GitHub repository. We put a link in that earlier. I'll add that to the show notes, but that's github.com/Oracle, spring-cloud-Oracle. That is all the information we need to kind of get up and started with Spring Cloud Oracle. The starters, the examples, everything we need. So those are two probably really good resources. Any other resources we're kind of missing out on there?
Those are good starting points. I mean, they link off to other stuff,
Okay.
Over those link out. So, yeah, that's a good place to start for sure.
Definitely, yeah.
Cool.
Anders, Mark, if people want to find you on the internets, if you want to be found on the internets, where would they find you?
Some people don't want to.
Yeah.
LinkedIn's probably the best for me. I'm Anders Swanson on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat with people about any of this stuff. Help them out with samples, examples, or whatever too.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
LinkedIn's good for me too. I'm on LinkedIn and GitHub. Like if you look at our repo, you'll find us in GitHub.
Yeah, open a GitHub issue if you try something and it doesn't work, or you have questions, or you want to see new features.
Try it out. If you have any interest at all in working with Oracle and Spring, please try out our stuff and let us know if you like it, or if you see things that we should add. We would love to get feedback from people.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Cool. All right. Well,
that's that very last question from Simon. Oracle. So we're covering Oracle Database and Oracle Cloud OCI services. We do have a Oracle NoSQL database starter in there. Oracle Coherence, which is our in-memory data grid thing. We also have starters for that. I think we're probably not going to go and do stuff like all of the SaaS applications and e-business suite and Fusion apps and all that kind of application side of stuff. Probably not healthcare, but all of the technology, cloud and database and technology stuff. I think we.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I think a good place to start, and I've done this with other kind of cloud vendors in the past, is like I set up an application that talks to a database. So I'm just using like the OCI free tier. I connect to a database. And then I realize my app needs some type of eventing, right? Or it needs email, or it needs the log management. Like you just kind of like start to build on from there. And I think, like you say, if you go to that free tier, you can see a list of the services. That usually is like a kind of like a way of exploring things and like seeing what I might need in my application. So good place to start. Well, you guys got me psyched. I'm going to build a simple demo out, talking to Oracle free tier. I'm going to build in a couple services and we'll get that out on the YouTube channel. So I'll report back to you with what I find. And GitHub, great place to kind of file those discussions, right? Those issues if I have any. Awesome. Cool. Well, Anders, Mark, thank you so much for joining us here on Office Hours today. We really appreciate it. And if anybody has questions on Spring Cloud Oracle, you know where to find Mark and Anders. You know where to find us. We'd be happy to help. And with that,
thanks so much for having us. Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
We'd love to do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.